Welcome back. Shovel the dirt off your boots and settle in. Tonight's tale is for all you thrill seekers and rule breakers. You curious cats who just have to peek behind the curtain of the past. Our subjects tonight are a group of urban explorers, driven by a thirst for adventure and a nostalgia for a time they never knew. They thought they could poke and prod at the bones of a bad dream without consequence. But they forgot the first rule of the graveyard, kiddies. What's gone should stay gone. We call this ride Flesh and Gears.
The fence was a joke, a rusted skeleton of chain link that parted with a weary sigh. Forest shadows slipped through, swallowed by the oppressive silence of what was once Cupid's kingdom. 15 years it had stood abandoned, a monument to a forgotten joy that had curdled into melancholy. Nature was reclaiming its territory with a vengeance. Sumac wreathed the skeletal remains of a roller coaster, its steel spine arching against the bruised twilight sky like a fossil of some gargantuan serpent. "Can you feel that?" Maya whispered, raising her camera. She was the artist, here to capture the haunting beauty of decay. "It's like the laughter is still here, just silent." "It's the silence that's creepy," Chloe murmured. She was the tag-along, her curiosity warring with a deep-seated unease, her eyes fixed on the park's mascot, a giant peeling cupid head, half submerged in a pool of black, stagnant water. Its painted eyes were wide, its cheerful smile a grotesque rictus of misplaced mirth. It looked almost human, but wrong. "It's epic," Leo declared, his voice echoing too loudly. He was the leader, the adrenaline junkie who lived for the thrill of the forbidden. A real-life time capsule. Ben, ever the cynic, snorted, more like a tetanus shot waiting to happen. They walked the main concourse, their boots crunching on shattered asphalt. Faded cartoon cherubs, once whimsical, now peered from graffiti-splattered concession stands with a moldy, vacant cheer. Maya stopped, framing a shot of a collapsed ticket booth. "Remember the rule," she said, more to Leo than anyone else. "Take nothing but pictures. Leave nothing but footprints." "Rules are for the people on the other side of the fence," Leo shot back, a reckless grin on his face. "What's the point of finding a time capsule if you don't open it?" His words hung in the dead air, a challenge to the sleeping ghosts of the place. It was their first and most fatal transgression. They weren't here to observe. They were here to possess. They found it at the heart of the park, tucked behind a petrified forest of dead cotton candy trees. Cupid's Tunnel of Love. The sign was peeling, but the gaudy, heart-shaped entrance was unmistakable. A massive wooden water wheel stood silent in a trough of water as black and still as oil. "The old mill," Ben said, a rare spark of historical interest in his eyes. Classic makeout ripe in the 50s. Gave kids a few minutes of privacy when they couldn't even hold hands in public, without getting the stink eye at least. "Let's take a ride," Leo said, his eyes gleaming. "Don't be an idiot," Maya snapped. "The machinery is shot. We're not touching anything." But Leo was already gone. Circling the operator's booth, he found a rusted control panel and beside it a heavy manual crank. "Give me a hand, Ben." "Leo, no!" Maya's voice was sharp. But it was too late. With a collective grunt, the two men threw their weight against the crank. A deep, groaning shudder vibrated through the ground, the sound of metal protesting a slumber of decades. The great paddle wheel trembled, then began to turn with agonizing slowness. It churned the stagnant water, releasing a foul smell of rot and ozone. With a final deafening clank, a string of tinny, cheerful music sputtered to life from a hidden speaker. They had done it. They had performed a kind of mechanical necromancy, forcing the dead to dance for their amusement. Ignoring Maya's furious glare and Chloe's terrified silence, Leo untied one of the swan-shaped boats and pulled it to the dock. "All aboard!" The boat drifted into the yawning blackness of the tunnel. The music, a cheerful lover's ballad from the 1950s, was horribly warped. The notes were flat, the tempo dragged, and a low electrical hum vibrated up through the hole. The first scene glided into view, illuminated by a flickering UV purple light. It was a rosy-cheeked animatronic ferryman, meant to be welcoming. He raised a hand to wave, but the movement was wrong. A jerky, unnatural twitch that violated every human norm. Its painted smile was too wide, its eyes a fraction too far apart. Chloe shrank back, a whimper escaping her lips. It's just an old robot, Leo said, but his voice lacked conviction. The boat drifted on. They passed a gazebo where a courting couple sat, frozen in a chaste embrace. As the boat drew parallel, their heads turned in perfect, silent unison to follow its passage. There was no clanking of gears, no whirring of servos, just a smooth, silent, synchronized observation that felt deeply, horribly wrong. "Did you see that?" Ben whispered, his cynicism finally cracking. The music degraded further, the melody dissolving into a discordant dirge. A new sound emerged from beneath it, a wet, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The horror shifted from psychological to visceral. They passed a scene labeled Teddy Bear's Picnic. One of the bears had a tear in its fabric arm, but inside there were no wires, no stuffing, only a wet, glistening length of what looked horribly like a tendon, intertwined with rusted gears. The air, once just damp, now carried the coppery tang of old blood. The ride was no longer just broken, it was diseased. The animatronics were no longer just moving, they were alive. As they passed the gazebo again, the courting couple was no longer chaste. Their porcelain faces had begun to crack and melt like eggshells, sagging into each other to form a single shared mass of pulsing, organic tissue. It was a grotesque violation of the body, a transformation into something monstrous and unrecognizable. A cherub dangling from the ceiling leaned down as they passed, its arm extended with an audible crack of bone. Its fingers, not plastic but waxy and cold-looking, like corpse flesh, reached for Maya's camera. The ride wasn't just haunted, it had become physically alive. The figures weren't animatronics, they were specimens, preserved, perhaps, from the very couples who had once sought privacy in this darkness, their intimacy made literal and eternal. The end came not with a bang, but with a slow, horrifying absorption. The figures reached out not to kill, but to merge. This was their punishment, a poetic justice tailored to their sins. Leo, who wanted to control the ride, was grabbed by the ferryman. He screamed as his hands were pulled towards the grinding machinery, his flesh and the rusted metal fusing into one. He became a permanent part of the controls he had so arrogantly forced into motion. Ben, the cynic who mocked everything, was met by a jeering clown face that emerged from the wall. It pressed against his, and his sneer of disbelief froze as his features were pulled and stretched, his skin becoming a new permanent mask of painted terror on the laughing automaton. The cherub's waxy fingers closed around Maya's camera. As she stared, frozen in horror, the camera began to sink into her face, the lens replacing her eye, the metal housing melding with her skull. She, who had come to capture the park's haunting beauty, was now its newest, most haunting exhibit. The boat drifted into the final dark stretch of the tunnel. Chloe was huddled in the back, her fear finally consuming her. The last thing heard was her soft fading cry, swallowed by the endless grinding loop of the machinery and the distorted, mocking love song. The ride never stopped. In the heart of the dead park, in the suffocating darkness, the swan boats continued their slow, grinding circuit. The music played its endless, warped dirge, and if one were to shine a light on the animatronic tunnel, they would see 4 new figures among them, seamlessly integrated. A ferryman fused to his controls, a clown with a new screaming face, and a photographer with a lens for an eye. And in the back of one swan boat, a small, still shape, huddled in terror, forever riding the dark water.
Looks like our little explorers got a little too attached to the scenery. They wanted to make a memory, but now they'll be a memory forever. It just goes to show you, kiddies, when you visit the past, don't overstay your welcome. You might find the checkout is a real scream. Pleasant nightmares.